Hi, welcome back. How are you? Um, I am doing this video for the nurses out there who are looking to either learn to sew or for somebody else who might be learning to sew for a nurse. Um, Forgive me, the YouTube is not exactly how I want my videos to look just yet. I'm doing this without all the equipment that I need. And if you're here watching this video so that you can make masks for nurses, hopefully that's something that you have sympathy for. Um, so right now I'm going to go through the Instructables mask for a nurse by a nurse. Um, I printed um, her pattern off. It looks like this. And she gave you this lovely square here, 1 inch by 1 inch. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to check that once you've printed this. I printed it off. It didn't come out to 1 inch by 1 inch. She may have it fixed already. Let me show you what I did. I held it up to my ruler. It's not quite an inch. I don't know if you can see that it's not quite an inch, but it's not quite an inch. It's just a little bit under. And the thing is, it has to be able to fit over the N95 mask. So what I did was she's got all of these numbers here, 7.5 inches, 5.5 inches, 5.5 inches. So I used a ruler, and if you don't have a quilter's ruler at home, you can just use a straight edge. Preferably a clear one if you have one. If you don't have a clear straight edge, you can just line up a ruler the best that you can, and you're going to try to manage the same angles that what she did. So here she tells us that this should be 7.5 inches. Mine was only about 7 inches, so I had to add a half an inch. I added about a quarter to the top and about a quarter to the bottom. I just marked those with my pen, and then I lined up my ruler with that dot. Oh, and the top was supposed to be 5.5 inches, and on mine it was only 5. So first I measured off 5.5 inches, and I brought it out to here, whereas hers ended here. So I brought it out to here, and I drew a little line for myself so that I knew that my back line needed to come to here. So that's 5.5 inches from one side to the other back here. Then I used my markup here where I had increased the size to 7.5 and lined it up so that it followed the line that she gave me here. This one's hers. And I just followed it. And then I did the same on the bottom, and all of my measurements ended up coming out right once I had done that. So make sure you're using the right size. Your printer might not be the right size. If you print out a pattern, make sure you have a size equivalent, a size reference, so that you make sure that you've got the right thing. Now, fabric. If you have fabric that you have bought and you have it laying around, use that. Quilters cotton is, or if you can get your hands, if you're a nurse and you can get your hands on some OR scrubs, not scrubs, blankets or sheets, use those. If you can't get your hands on something from the OR, use just quilters cotton. If you have an old sheet, if you have an old pillowcase, if you have anything that's that just plain cotton that'll withstand washing and washing and washing. And the plain cotton's easier to work with. The stiffer the fabric is, the easier it is to work with on the sewing machine. So it's more forgiving for a new sewer. So this is the fabric that I'm using. This is the pattern that I'm using. Instructables. I'll have it in the description. I also have 1/2 inch bias tape. If you can get this, get it. If you can't get it, well, all that it is it's ironing that they already did for you. So if you can't get it, then what you can do is I'll put a link for another video to teach you how to do bias tape. You can do it any width you want. The wider it is, the easier it's going to be to work with. So most people cut theirs about 2 inches. This is right at, well, a little bit, yeah, this is right at 2 inches. So if you cut this, if you cut a piece of fabric, you cut it 2 inches and you have to cut it on the bias. So what that means, if you're new to sewing, you have the parts of the fabric. This part here that's white, this is called the selvage. The bias goes, so there's the selvage and you don't have much stretch. There's, I guess the cross grain, and you don't have a whole lot of stretch. But then along the bias, which is diagonal between the selvage and the cross grain, there's a lot of stretch. And you get a lot better long pieces of tape with it, with something cut on the bias to finish a piece. So this is already cut on the bias and it's already ironed for you. If you have to cut it yourself, I'll post a tutorial for that from another YouTuber. Anyway, so I'm going to use this. And then for the ties, because if we don't have to make a whole lot of bias tape, that's easier. So for the ties, I actually found some ribbon for like $1 for a whole bunch of ribbon. So I'm going to be using ribbon. It's 1/4 of an inch, I think. It looks like it's about 1/4 of an inch. It's a little bit less than 1/2 an inch. It's a little bit less than 1/2 an inch. So it's not too wide. So this is going to be the string that you tie it on with once we're done. So there's your equipment. There's what you need. So let me take you through this tutorial. I've sort of set it up for you like Martha Stewart. You're going to pin down your pattern. Once you've cut it out, once you've made sure it's the right size, you're going to pin it down. And then you're just going to take a pair of fabric scissors. And fabric scissors can just be any scissors that you've got, but they've got to be sharp enough that they're not going to chew up your fabric. There are some scissors that are not sharp enough and they're just going to chew at your fabric. So choose the sharpest scissors you've got. You're just going to cut it out real quick. And then, oh, sorry, I didn't tell you how to lay this out. So what I did was I folded over my fabric. See here? So I've got 2 layers of fabric that are facing each other, or not, they're opposite each other. But I've got them laid out and it's folded over so that when I put my pattern here, it says fold. And so you line that up with the fold here and pin it down so that it doesn't scooch on you, because that's no fun. And then you don't end up with a pattern cut like you should. So you put that on the fold and you pin it down and then you cut. And you use your sharp scissors. And once you've cut your piece, you've got 2 pieces. Now, she wants you to have an ugly side so that you know which side's the inside. So I've been lining them up. She's a nurse. She designed it. It's her way. That's what I'm doing. So normally you would put the ugly sides together, but we're going to put the ugly sides, we're going to put front to back, front to back. So then you're going to pin that, and I'm going to throw that over there because here's where Martha Stewart comes in. Okay, so you're going to pin that, and when you pin it, you're going to pin so that the head of one pin is followed by the point of the next. You're always going to go point to head, point to head, point to head. So that all the way around, you have all the points lined up next to the head. And that's so that when you're sewing, you can just pull them out. And as you go through the sewing machine, this is the side that you're going to sew. So you line it up in your sewing machine. Oh, help. Okay. You line it up in your sewing machine so that you can pull it out, as I said. Now, if you look here, there's all sorts of numbers on your sewing machine that'll tell you what size you're sewing here. Where your needle is compared to where the edge of your fabric is called your seam allowance. For this, you're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You always start with your needle down, and then we just start. Don't whip through it. Let your needle go up and down slowly. The last thing you want to do is go to work with a sewing needle stuck through your finger. So as you get to your first pin, pull it out. Did you see how I could just pull it back? I don't know if you could see it or not. Let me see if I can get you closer. So as we go along, and I'm sewing faster here because I know how and I've done it before. So if this is your first rodeo, don't go that fast. And then anytime that you turn, you pick up and you turn, and then you put back down the presser foot right here. And there's usually a little lever on your sewing machine to pick it up and put it down. When you get to a corner, get so that you've got just about your seam allowance left before you turn, and then you're going to pick up and turn. You'll double check it over here, and if it's still lined up at the half inch for the seam allowance, then you know that you took it far enough. I did not. I'm going to take a few more little stitches there, and then I'm going to turn it, and now it lines up with my 1/2 inch seam allowance here. I know that it's too bright for y'all to see that. So when you take a turn, you leave your needle in. You leave your needle in the fabric when you take a turn. If yours has to be turned down, sometimes you actually have to use, now this is old school, but like if you're using an old sewing machine from somebody's attic or something, there's a knob here and you can manually make the needle go up and down just by spinning that knob over here. So if you need to put it down, turn it down. If you need to take it up, take it up. When you get to the edges, we'll talk about that in a minute. Hold on. Okay, let me get that out of the way. Let's go back over here. Okay, so now you've got your piece of fabric that you've sewn your 1/2 inch seam on it. Okay, now there are some marks on this pattern that she gave you, well, all of us. There's some marks right here, little vampire teeth. Okay, and so I moved those to the outside, and I kind of shifted their position a little bit away. I kept the center ones in the center, but then the top and bottom ones I shifted a little bit to accommodate the fact that I had to change the size to make the measurements what she had prescribed. So those little vampire teeth, we're going to mark onto our fabric. Now, we're going to line up the center point, and I'm going to scooch it in just a little bit from the very edge. And then I'm just going to use a grease pencil. It is not what you use when you are using fabric, but it won't rub off. If you have a piece of chalk that's brightly colored, you can use that instead if you'd rather. It'll wash out better than the other. And then on the other side, if I put it down, then now it's face down, so that doesn't work. So then I just open it out so that I can transfer from that side. Okay. And then I've got a hot iron here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pointy part up, because that's the nose. And I'm working with the wrong side facing me the whole time. I'm marking on the wrong side. Oh, let me mark the darts while I'm at it. Because before you start doing any of the pleats, it's easier to mark the darts. There's a dart for the nose and chin. And so you line up the edges and I've just folded the pattern along the dart that she gave us. I've folded it and then I mark it. Same down here. Just going to fold it and mark it. Okay. Now, well, that's going to be on the floor. For the pleats, I'm going to take the bottom marking when you just marked it just now. I'm going to take that bottom marking and I'm going to fold it down. And I'm going to press that with a hot iron. Okay. Then I'm going to come up and at the top pleat, at the top of those two marks, I'm going to fold up. Okay. So that looks like this, with the nose pointing up, and from the front your pleat points down. With the nose pointing up, your pleat points down if you do it that way. Okay, so and on the next ones, you fold down at the bottom, fold up at the top one, fold down at the bottom one, fold up at the top one. So I've already done those and pinned them. And then you're going to sew again where you already just sewed. You're going to sew again right here. You're going to run that through the sewing machine, and you're going to end up with this, and your pleats will be supported with an extra seam right here. Okay, and then you're going to take some scissors, again, sharp ones, the sharpest ones you can find, and you're going to trim down that edge there to about 1/4 of an inch. Make sure you don't cut through your line of thread, because that's a game changer. Okay, so go around your whole mask and cut out, or trim back your seams. Okay, all right, now I'm going to take some bias tape and I'm going to fit it on here. You're going to open it up, not all the way. You're just going to open it up like this and then sandwich it over your mask here on the edge. And you're going to pin that, and then you're going to put it, you're going to trim this, okay? And you're going to put that through on the sewing machine, and same for the opposite side. And then you'll have a mask that looks like this. Oh, and I did the darts. I didn't show you how to do the darts. On the sewing machine, you just go and you run this through. Do that seam twice, once and then again, or once, and then there's a R button on most sewing machines. That's a reverse stitch or back stitch button. And if you don't know your sewing machine very well, you can just look up, you can get online and look up just about any sewing machine owner's manual and figure out all these things, all these functions, back stitching and things like that. So you're going to come forward and then back, or you can go once and then a second time. Okay, I'm not even going to bother to trim that off because that's just one more step that I don't need. Plus I can fold it flat and then hopefully it won't bug you while you're working. Okay, so now I'm going to open up my bias tape again and I'm going to fold it over so that there's a finished edge here, and I'm just going to hit it with the iron real quick. I'm going to hit it, not my finger, hopefully. That's the goal. And I'm going to do this and fold this in here. At the same time, I'm going to tuck in a piece of ribbon. Did you see that? I just tucked it right in there. Okay? And I'm going to pin it down. There it is. Now you're going to keep sandwiching your mask in this bias tape as you go over. I'm going to make sure that I pin down that little dart that we did. Here we go. And when I get to this side, I'm going to cut it long. fold that end in. I can hit it with the iron again. If you don't have an iron, you can just smush things with your fingers. Try to get it to lay flat. I don't know why there's an elephant upstairs in my house right now. Sorry if there's a bunch of thumping in my audio here. So the strings need to be about 43 inches long total. So if you do about 17 inches of ribbon, then you can tuck that in here. And you're going to do about 17 inches on the bottom as well. And let me put together the bottom, and then I'm going to run this through and show you what you've got. Okay? I used a box stitch. Oh, that's an ugly one. Let me show you my ugliest one. No, this one's the ugly one. Look at that mess. But it'll work. So I made a box stitch here, and that's where, as you're coming forward, you end up, you use reverse and you turn about a 45-degree angle, and you go here, and then you come here, and then you come back, and you just keep making these turns until you've gotten sort of an X shape, and it'll give this a little bit more strength. Another thing that I mentioned in the part of my video that I didn't actually record is that it might be important as you're trying to push this through the sewing machine. This is a lot of layers, and sometimes your sewing machine won't be able to choke them all down. So you might have to give a little bit of back pressure on that ribbon as you're trying to feed it through the sewing machine. Right there where all the layers come together. So right where you're trying to get you to do the box stitch, there, that's where you're going to have trouble. Then what I want you to do at the end of your ribbons is tie them in a knot, because that way you don't have to do any sewing or anything like that to finish them off and keep them from fraying all the way up. Just do a knot. It's good enough. That should do it for you. Here we go. Here's our finished product. It should go over your N95 mask. That's what the nurse who designed it for. Good luck. Thanks for doing what you do.